a modern piece of legislation, technologically neutral, flexible enough to not to be obsolete in few years, robust enough to reinforce data subjects' rights, but also the accountability of controllers. In the past, we assisted to a debate concerning, for instance, self-regulation against regulatory approaches. I think we have now squared the circle in the sense that self-regulation is within the scope of obligation of the data protection reform in the EU, but we will invest more energies on accountability. FEDMA represents a reliable and knowledgeable network of operators, and it is crucial for data protection in the relevant area that this kind of thinking reflects the dynamicity of the process. So we need innovative approaches from all of you, a contribution to understand what the limits are, since we are implementing the Lisbon Treaty. Fundamental rights are there, but we have to identify how safeguards can work in practice, how principles can be better scalable, how we can better focus on requirements which are effective and relevant to reduce as much as possible useless administrative burdens, and to focus on what is needed. My colleague and I would like not to be simply predicating well-known principles or safeguards which are on the holy charters and papers. We would like to translate these principles into a reality. We would like to allow data protection authorities to better cooperate. We would like to act as a facilitator of cooperation at international level. We would like to offer our expertise to the legislators. We will remain an independent regulator in the sense that we are not responsible for the final outcome, but in exercising our role, we would like to allow them to identify the relevant solutions, not only alert them about the limits. Data protection is not so simple. I attended the full process concerning the adoption of the FEDMA Code of Conduct, and I think it is now sort of a test and a lesson learned for all, including data protection authorities. The new legal framework will reinforce the obligation for member states and for the European Data Protection Board to insist on codes of conduct at the national and EU level. So the expectation is to have more detailed provisions, to have a more dynamic role for data protection authorities in certifying this basis of co-legislation. Self-regulation is perhaps a little bit old-fashioned, since the process will see an interaction. Operators should understand what the limits of the law are, and regulators should better understand how it's important to have solutions which are approved by not by dictation, but by dynamic interaction. And also the experience of different member states is fragmented on codes of conduct. So perhaps insisting on an update of your code of conduct, and by thinking to the data-driven economy, would be definitely a good experience.
If we think about the principles of data protection or privacy protection, I think the principles that have to be present there are actually the same ones that will exist in the new regulation, which are the same as they were in the directive from 1995. Moreover, if we look to the discussion that was held in 1970s and 1980s, where the first law on data protection was prepared in some of the European countries, we may find the reflection of the things which we see at the moment as well. So we can see that the people were aware of the fact that they already lost the control over the way the data is processed in 70s, in 80s. So at the time where big data meant completely different things than today. And at the same time, they started to prepare the principles which are in force until today. But the very important role of the self-regulation, whatever kind of self-regulation, is somehow translating these principles into the practical life of the sector of the industry or practical life of operators. And in this sense, the work of the organizations like FEDMA is incredibly important. I would also stress the fact that the code of conduct that FEDMA has prepared previously was the only international solution that existed in Europe and that was really understood as self-regulation under the directive. There were many other sources of bylaw on the national level, but nothing on the European level. So you already have the very good experience of translating the sometimes philosophical principles that appear in the law into the practical work of the operators. Definitely the self-regulation in the direct marketing is a very good example of setting the real stand for processing of personal data of the persons, of the people. We have to be aware of the fact that this is not only the address data or the consumer's data that was circulated last years, but it will be all different kind of information about the person that may appear at any place in the world, especially in the future world of Internet of Things, which is actually the thing that we have to be prepared for. The role of the self-regulation is incredibly important. The organizations like FEDMA can in this way transfer the knowledge of the law and the experience with the processing of the data into the competitive advantage between the companies, because this competitive advantage will be also the way that we use the data of the people and how people feel secure with the ways of processing that we do. So although the self-regulation in this market is not directly addressed to the individual person whose data is processed, it can be actually one of the assurances that the person has as far as the rights and freedoms are concerned. My main message will be that that's wonderful that you start. That's wonderful what you want to do. But please remember that preparing the text and passing this text and having it in the hand is not the end of the process. It's actually only the beginning of the process. Because the real success of the self-regulatory instruments, whatever they are, will be when they are enforced properly and when they are playing their role on the market. With the bylaws, it's the same like with the law. The fact that we pass the law does not solve the problem. It may only give us the way to deal with the problem that we have. And then the word accountability comes. And the accountable operator is the one who can use the self-regulation in their business the way that the principles of the law are taken into consideration, and the principles of the market and the practicalities of the market can be fulfilled. That's a very good question for the long conference once again. But first of all, it's a very good question for those who are dealing with the very practical problems of the processing of the data. Only the representatives of the sector can actually go with good solutions on the way to be accountable on the market and to be accountable to the clients, as the markets and the clients will differ one from another. What is extremely important as far as the accountability principles are concerned is the fact that this is only enforceable accountability that has to be understood as something that is expected in the self-regulatory solutions. It's very hard to say in the law, and it's also very hard to say in the bylaw, how the accountability looks like. It has to be only the guide in order to achieve the goals that we want to have.